Welcome to Worldview Tube's Washington Report on this February 11th, 2026. I'm joined by Jim Pfaff of theconservativecaucus.com, theconservativecaucus.com. Jim, we got a pretty good amount of news today. We got the jobs numbers came out today. Pam Bondi is up on Capitol Hill testifying in front of Congress. And we have some extra things we'll be throwing in there as well. How are you doing?
Doing well. Good to see you, sir.
You as well. Well, let's start with the jobs numbers. Let me see what I saved here. Stephen Moore was on Fox. The jobs report came out that there was 130,000 jobs added in the month of January. Here is Stephen Moore, he was a former, is he a current Trump advisor, economic advisor?
Well, he plays an advisory role, and I'm sure he talks to him a lot, but he's not on staff as an advisor anymore.
Okay. Well, here he is on Fox this morning.
For the last year, private sector employment is growing, Maria, and public sector, especially federal jobs, are shrinking. That's exactly what we want to see. Right. We want to see the government shrink and private sector job growth. And by the way, Maria, this is exactly the opposite of what we saw under Biden, where we do these job reports every month. And one of the biggest increases in employment was federal hiring, and that's what led to these big deficits.
And that is basically President Trump and wanting to shrink
a reorientation of the economy to private business.
Yeah.
All right, there you go. So that probably plays a large role in it as well for the job growth, is all these federal workers who've been laid off going and getting jobs in the private sector, right?
Well, yeah, and I messed up not getting to you Rick Santelli's take on CNBC, but the other thing about that is that the U6 number, which is people not connected to the workforce. That's the bucket of people who are retirees, or maybe someone is a housewife, or someone just can't find a job and they've stopped looking over a certain period of time.
Mm-hmm.
That
is it
number
Rick Santelli? Is it the clip of him with the umbrella?
Oh, no, I don't think it's with an umbrella.
Okay, go ahead.
But anyway, the U6 number catches everybody who has just not been looking for or not even tried for a certain amount of time, or people that are retired or housewives. That number is decreasing. It was 8.5% before. It's down to 8%. And then the overall unemployment went down as well, too, I think by 0.2 percentage points, or as we say in the business, 20 basis points, at least when it comes to interest rate numbers. But anyway, that number's down as well. Listen, there's no doubt. Steve Moore is absolutely correct. One of the biggest areas of job growth during the Biden administration was government employment, not just federal, but also state employment. If I recall correctly, well, I'm not sure exactly what the number of jobs was total, but there might have been added, I think, nearly 2 million jobs, state, federal, and local employees. That is not good for any economy. There's nothing good about increasing government employment. You should be decreasing it, and consider this a net gain. What happens when you take people out of the private sector employment and put them into public sector? Two big things happen. One, productivity goes down. There's nothing productive about government to begin with, one. Two, working as a government employee is never productive because there are no incentives for doing well. So your production rate per employee goes down also. So their production goes down doing already unproductive things. When you put employees into the private sector, then that in productivity tends to go up over time because those people are undertaking productive activities, even if they are unproductive, assuming an employer's willing to carry an unproductive employee. The incentive of free markets is that productivity increases, wealth tends to increase overall at every level of the economy, and then the economy itself becomes more efficient and effective because good things start to happen. When there's economic activity, that's always net a good thing. And you have bad actors in every economy. 6,000 years of recorded human history proves the moral depravity of mankind. We don't tend to do well, but when those market forces come in there, it forces us to do better, both as individuals and as corporations. So this is actually a fabulous number. And listen, I want it to be more than 130,000 new jobs added per month. That number is not far from a record, But compared to where we were, that those are actual private sector jobs coming in, that is a fantastic positive result.
Yeah, and here is a graph that the Rapid Response, I think it's a White House account put out. Under President Trump, federal employment has declined to its lowest level since 1966 and the lowest level in recorded history as a share of the total workforce. So this just shows how effective they've been at cutting the federal jobs.
That's right. Give credit in part to my friend Russ Vogt, who's head of the Office of Management and Budget, and also the personnel area of the White House. Those are critical places for there to be these cuts happening, because it's hard to fire a federal employee. It's not as hard as firing a New York City educator, high school or New York City public schools employee, where you've got literal criminals in what they call bumper rooms because they can't get rid of them at all due to the restrictions in New York law. But in federal law, it is difficult to get rid of employees. You have to do it for certain reasons. In other words, there has to be cutbacks in services. And we need a cutback in services in the federal government. But yeah, it's all positive. This is good for the economy. It's not bad. It's bad maybe for an individual government employee, but those people need to be going and doing something productive anyway. Like I have less, I have less sympathy for a government employee losing their job on average than I do for someone who is just taking welfare and not even trying to look for a job. By comparison, I have more sympathy for the welfare recipient.
Yep. Well, moving on to the SAVE Act. President Trump was on Fox Business, an interview with Fox Business the other day, and he brought up the SAVE Act, and here's what he had to say.
Do we have other things in mind? Yeah, we do. We have things in mind, and we have perfecting a little bit of what we did, because this is the biggest bill ever passed in the history of Congress, and it's a great thing. But we also have other bills we want to get. We want to get the Save America Act passed. Save America is on voting. We want people to have voter ID. We want people to have proof of citizenship, and we want to have no mail-in ballots other than if you're in the military or you're sick or you're away or some reasonable but good excuse.
Can that get done, you think, before the midterm elections?
It polls at about 94%, including Democrats are at 87%, other than Democrat politicians, because they cheat.
It's a huge vote. I guess the House is going to re-vote on it because of the photo ID,
right?
Which is so important. Actually, you need a photo ID to vote on the floor of the House, even though Democrats are opposed to a photo ID.
That's right.
They can't vote for their own bill.
But think of it, Larry. So you have a thing called Save America Act. Save America Act. And Schumer's going to say, I oppose it. How do you oppose Save America? So this is simply on voting. Voter ID. We want a statement that you are a citizen of America. I think that's a reasonable thing to ask. And no mail-in ballots, which are very corrupt. No country in the world is doing mail-in ballots, or especially the way we do them. I mean, they send them all over the place. Nobody knows. It's totally corrupt.
All right, Jim. He's right. We obviously want these bills to be passed, but we shouldn't even have to have the Save America Act, right? We should. The SAVE Act is sitting in the Senate and not being passed, correct?
Well, yeah, it is. They put the voter ID requirement in what's called the Save America Act, which takes the SAVE Act and adds to it. The reason that this is having to be addressed is because states are changing their laws against requirements for citizens to vote. In California, municipal elections are wide open to anyone. It's literally wide open to anyone. I think there are hardly any restrictions at all. And affirmatively, in municipal elections in California, non-citizens can vote. They said that very directly. I think there are a few other states that do either exactly that or something similar to it. What this bill will do is require states on federal elections where they have authority to require voter ID. And I think it has a requirement that you have to use a real ID, because real ID requires citizenship verification. By the way, I was against the real ID law, not to get into that. And some people are very concerned about that, and I am too. I'm not ignoring that for those of you hearing me. But the point is that if we have real ID right now, the citizenship requirement takes away every loophole that states might put in there. Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution says that states can determine the time and choosing of where elections can be held. And so that principle, which some Republicans very foolishly, like Mike Pence and his organization, are saying, we got to leave all these election laws to the state, or at least they had put that out. I think they've since corrected themselves. But it is true. We want states to set up the way they do elections. But Article 1, Section 4 also says that Congress may, from time to time, as it determines, regulate those elections. We've been doing this for decades and decades now, almost a full century. There are federal laws that tell you what you have to do in elections. The Voting Rights Act, the Help America Vote Act, which actually built in some loopholes to the problems that we have right now. The Save America Act is constitutional, and it should be passed. It looks like the House is going to pass this. I think it's going to pass it. And then the Senate, we're hearing that John Thune is backing off of his hesitancy about requiring the standing filibuster rule. And the standing filibuster basically says, as we talked about before, that Mr. Smith goes to Washington. You have to talk, and you don't get to keep the floor if you drop and have to stop. Then it goes to a majority vote. That is the filibuster the way it is in the Senate. Although this, what we call zombie filibuster, has allowed filibusters for people to hold the floor well past their ability to talk on the floor. And that needs to go away. If we just have to get rid of that. And Thune is apparently going to do it. It will save our elections if we can pass this bill. Of course, it's going to have to be enforced because states are going to try to get by it that are determined to have illegals voting. But this is a very, very key issue. And as I've maintained, all of our political disagreements that we have, we can survive. We have survived some really bad times in our history with politics being so, corrupt and people being at each other's throats. We had that during the Civil War, other times in our history. We can survive all that if we can ensure that our elections are safe. Because what we have to be able to do is for the American people, honestly and in a fair manner, say to their elected officials, we've had enough of you and we want to make a change, and know that that change happened because the people said it. Right now, I'm not convinced that our elections allow us to do that. A lot of people are convinced of that, and this would be a very good step to allowing us as citizens to know that we can make a change if we want to.
Yep. And Senator Dick Durbin was asked about the SAVE Act outside of the Capitol, and here's what he had to say about it.
SAVE Act is expected to be brought to the floor for a vote this week. What are your thoughts on that? Are you going to support the SAVE Act?
Not at all. It's a terrible idea. This notion that we want to put more obstacles in the paths of voters is just what Donald Trump wants, fewer people voting. I want every legal citizen in America to be able to vote without obstacles.
Do you think requiring an ID to vote in elections is making it harder? I mean,
it's more than that. It's more than an ID. It's proof that you were born in America. So what are we talking about, a passport or a birth certificate? Got one of those handy with you in your purse? I doubt it.
Well, if you're going to the voting poll and you know what you need to bring, I mean, it's just one of those documents, right?
Well, it's just one of those documents. Think about securing your birth certificate before you go in to vote. Why are we creating these obstacles? So we have the lowest incidence of fraud and misuse of voting in the world. And Donald Trump wants to put more obstacles in the path of voters. I want everybody legally entitled to vote to have that option without complications.
Well, like you said earlier, you brought up the real ID that the Democrats were very much, I think, for. You had to bring a proof of citizenship. I think you had to bring two. I had to bring my not my passport, but my birth certificate and stuff to the DMV anytime I go to the DMV. Birth certificate
and Social Security card are typical.
Yeah. So why is that a problem for voting?
It's not. It never has been.
It's not.
Listen, he's a liar, by the way. I just want to say Dick Durbin's lying. It's a half lie. Let me put it this way. He says he wants every legal citizen to vote. Okay, well then support the bill because that's what it does, right? Everyone legally eligible. But what he really doesn't want, and what Democrats really don't want, is the hurdle of proving you're a citizen. Listen, right now in most states, you're going to pay between $5 and $20 to get your birth certificate. By the way, if you don't already have it, everyone's given a birth certificate at birth. The parents are, and sometimes people don't have that. But that document is there. It is proof. It is not a massive hurdle to go get a birth certificate. It takes time and effort. You have to go to whoever the authorizing issuer of the birth certificate is if you don't already have yours. If you do, keep it in a file. Bring it out when you need to. What he doesn't want are hurdles to people ineligible to vote or unwilling to take the proper steps to prove their eligibility to vote to be able to vote anyway. That's what he wants. I mean, that he can put whatever words around it that he wants to. There's a logical principle of equivocation. In other words, changing the meaning of the term in the middle of the discussion. At the beginning of the discussion, he says he wants every eligible voter to vote. But what he proposes is to allow ineligible voters to vote. That's an equivocation. That is a logical fallacy. It's a lie. He knows he's lying. He knows what he wants, and he's just another politician that's really good at making you think that he wants what he doesn't want at all.
Yeah, and as Mike Johnson pointed out in a press briefing, that you have to have an ID to attend the Democratic National Convention. So
you have to have an ID, as you just heard Larry Kudlow say, to be able to vote on the floor. You can't get your voting card as a congressman unless you can prove you're an American citizen. So, I mean, the absurdity and the twisting of reality that Democrats, and by the way, politicians in general, we got a lot of Republicans that do this on different issues. It's really crazy. But the twisting of it is really absurd. We need to be good thinkers who care about this and call these things out for what they actually are, and to look critically at the statements that are being made to see if people are actually saying what they say. And Dick Durbin is pretending like he's saying the very opposite of what he's actually saying.
Yeah. Well, we got to go to a break. We'll be back in just a minute with more.
News is moving faster than ever, and so are we. Worldview Tube brings you 24/7 live stream coverage, and now real-time alerts when it matters most. Once you have the Worldview Tube app installed, exit the app and navigate your way to Settings. In Settings, locate the tab labeled Notifications. Select the Notifications tab. Scroll down until you locate the Worldview Tube app icon. Select the tab, and here you can turn on and customize your notification experience for the Worldview Tube app. News doesn't wait, and neither should you. Turn on push notifications to stay informed. Every headline as it happens.
Introducing the Sentry Wellness System, the ultimate under-sink water treatment solution designed with you in mind. Say goodbye to harmful toxins and hello to water enriched with essential nutrients like calcium and magnesium. Enjoy the benefits of increased pH for on-demand alkalinity, all from a zero-waste system that fits seamlessly into your home. Installation is a breeze, taking just 15 minutes, so you can have clean, healthy, great-tasting water straight from your tap. Perfect for apartments, homes, rentals, and even RVs. Elevate your hydration and well-being with the Sentry Wellness System because you deserve the best in every drop.
Sentry H2O. Tap into wellness.
All right, welcome back from the break. Jim, this morning, Pam Bondi was testifying in Congress, and a lot of it was to do with the Epstein files and trafficking and border. But I think mainly most of the things I'm seeing coming out are about the Epstein files, which the Democrats have been silent about for the last, however many years, and now they care. But there's some pretty interesting clips coming out of there. Let's start with this one. AG Pam Bondi goes after Raskin. Raskin, I think, tries going after her, and she's not standing for it. Let's see what she had to say.
Not on our time. No way. And I told you about that, Attorney General, before you started.
You don't tell me.
Yeah, I did tell you because we saw what you did in the Senate.
You're a lawyer, not even a lawyer.
Committee will be in order.
Time, and I should get back at least 45 seconds.
We will give you a few more seconds. I said that already.
45 seconds.
Okay, I'm timing right now, Mr. Nadler. Go.
All right. My time. The answer to my question, how many of Epstein's co-conspirators has she indicted, is 0.
All right, so it looks like it's getting pretty heated. She said, "You don't tell me anything, you washed up, you're not even a lawyer." That's what she said to Raskin.
Almost Rubio-esque. Not quite. She doesn't quite get to Marco Rubio's capability of responding to these people. He does a fantastic job. But listen, there needs to be pushback. Again, these people, yesterday, I saw in a Senate hearing, I think it was Chris Van Hollen was questioning Howard Lutnick about connections that Howard Lutnick had to Epstein. And apparently Van Hollen believes that Lutnick didn't properly disclose his connections to Epstein in his initial hearings to become Commerce Secretary. So I can't remember his hearing, so I'm not sure precisely what he said. But what he did clarify and what came out in the files was that about, I think there were 8 to 12 instances where Lutnick was, talked about in the Epstein files. And in every one of them, according to his admission and the substance and content, was that he had a meeting here and there for an hour. They were neighbors and they had met one another, but he says he didn't see him for years and didn't spend any time with him. And then one thing mentioned that Lutnick had gone to Epstein Island. And what Lutnick said was, well, I was on a boat with my wife and kids on the Caribbean and some of our people who were, he had serving employees. And apparently he had lunch for an hour with Epstein, with his wife and kids on Epstein Island. And Van Hollen tried to make it out like there was something nefarious going on. In other words, Democrats are trying to do with the Epstein files what Donald Trump said would happen when they came out. Now, by the way, I was all for them coming out. I'm not against the Epstein files coming out at all. I don't take that line. But the point is that that is what Democrats wanted to do all along with this. They want to twist the Epstein files into something that it's not, and they'll work hard day and night to make sure that those who actually should be subject to criminal behavior or embarrassment for their behavior would come to very real justice. It's not embarrassing. Well, it's maybe a little bit embarrassing that Lutnick had lunch with Jeffrey Epstein on Epstein Island because Epstein Island means something. It doesn't mean what we think it means when it comes to Howard Lutnick and having his whole family there on the island. But it does mean something, so therefore you want to use it for something. That is the standard absurdity of politics, which, by the way, any politician getting mad at Howard Lutnick better be careful, because Ronald Reagan was right. Politics is the world's second oldest profession, and it has many of the characteristics of the oldest one, which, FYI, is prostitution. It's considered the oldest one. It's really outrageous how politicians act in this. And they get so unfocused. This happens on both sides of the aisle. I think much worse on the Democrat side of the aisle. In fact, to criminal behavior in some ways. But this is the problem with politics. You want to get your win, and you don't want to do what the Constitution says. The job of politicians in the federal government, of members of Congress, isn't even to be great politicians. You have to learn how to navigate the political system. But the job of a congressman's not to be a good politician. The job of a congressman is to faithfully follow the Constitution, and within that construct, to pass legislation. That's it. Mm-hmm. And that's not what we do in Congress. On both sides of the aisle, by the way, in most instances. It's absurd. These people are they're embarrassing themselves to people like me who look back and say, what are you doing? We did not elect you for this stuff, and you don't represent us. So just go off to your corner somewhere. And Jerry Nadler, man, what a scumbag. Total scumbag in every way.
Well, Jerry Nadler, that's the next clip I have. It looks like, I'm not totally positive, but it's what it looks like. Jerry Nadler fell asleep during the hearing. Watch this.
Protect the American people and defend the rule of law above all else. While our work is never done, we have made tremendous. In 2025, we saw the lowest murder rate in 125 years.
Yeah, it looks like he was definitely asleep. When that staffer comes over there, he pops up real quick. I think he was asleep there. So
yeah, it's an argument for term limits. The guy's in his late 70s and doesn't need to be there and doesn't have energy. He's been there for way too long. By the way, Donald Trump's in his late 70s too and has a supreme amount of energy. So, you know, I say that with caution, but he's been there too long. He's done too much to screw up this country. It's just absurd what we see out of these members.
Yeah,
of
I think
Congress.
there's exceptions, obviously, for certain people they age better, but for the most part, a lot of these people in Congress are definitely too high up there, I think, to be serving.
Well, just
Mitch
like federal, we
McConnell,
talked about federal employees earlier. Just like federal employees, just be there for so long. Go do something productive. Being a congressman is not a productive activity. It isn't. It's something necessary for our government. There's no doubt about that. It is a necessary thing that needs to be undertaken. But these people make over $174,000 a year. I worked in 2 congressional offices. I can tell you there is no time to do anything else except what you do as a congressman. So do that for a few years and then go the freak home. Let someone else do it. We really are. I have not always been for term limits. I'm for term limits now. We haven't, under our organization, an effort called Americans for Term Limits. In fact, you can go to americansfortermlimits.org. That's our website. We believe that these people need to stay for just a certain amount of time.
Well, that's how it used to be, right? From the founding.
Well, these guys didn't get paid enough to make a living.
Yeah.
And in fact, in the early part of this country, they got some stipend, but it wasn't enough to maintain themselves. And they only met for, 4, maybe 5 months a year, or they came into special sessions if something weird happened. They would go home and run their farms. We were an agricultural society at our founding. They went home and ran their farms or ran their law firms or whatever that they did. And then they came in and legislated for a little bit because our government used to be constrained very closely to constitutional limits. As I say to people all the time, read Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution and tell me how many federal agencies fall into the restraints that the Constitution places there. And I would say the majority of federal agencies have no business even existing because of the constraints that are in Article 1, Section 8. Most of the stuff we do in the federal government should be left to states to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, we got time for one more clip here. Another clip of President Trump's interview on Fox Business talking about the Supreme Court's decision on tariffs. Here we go.
I just hope the Supreme Court does what's right for the country, because now, will I figure something out? But the answer is yes. But it won't be as beautiful as it is right now.
So he says he'll figure something out if the case doesn't go his way. And the Supreme Court they've pushed back, right? Their ruling. They were supposed
they have. I think it's coming in May or something like that, if I recall correctly. Well, listen, ultimately, constitutionally, Congress does have authority on tariffs. And guess what they did? Guess what they did with that authority? They created emergency powers to allow the president to be able to deal with situations that Congress couldn't quickly enough deal with. And Donald Trump has been falling within the authority that Congress gave them. I was very disappointed that Thomas Massie voted for or against this thing to give Donald Trump the ability to continue on with what he's doing with tariffs, because I think that his policies are right, and I think he's the right guy to do them within the restraints of of the authority Congress has already given them. I thoroughly disagree with this idea that Donald Trump has been going beyond his executive authority. He has been given authority by Congress to do exactly what he's doing, and to the best of his ability has been doing it within those restraints, and we can argue on the edges of that. Someone may say this or that thing. By the way, I've said that I think that the Supreme Court is going to come with a mixed opinion. I think what they're going to do is they're going to clarify the legislation that's already on the books. In effect, that's what I think they're going to do. They're going to say, listen, these certain constructs, no, that's outside of presidential authority, but Congress gave the president authority to deal with emergency actions. This is what that legislation seems to look like to us. And I think that's what they're going to do. And Donald Trump's still going to have a hand to play in all this. And frankly, I'm fine with that. And I think it is a vendetta mentality in Congress to say that from the legislative branch that you want to restrict what Donald Trump's doing, because Congress already said what they want to do. Now, by the way, Congress has a right to pass anything they want because they do have the ultimate tariff authority. That is in Article 1, Section 8. But I do think that they granted the president this amount of authority, and I think Donald Trump has proven it can be very effective at helping us deal with nations trying to retaliate against us because Congress just doesn't work quickly enough.
Well, we're all out of time for tonight. Go to theconservativecaucus.com to check out Jim's organization and catch us at worldviewtube.com at the same time tomorrow.
And AmericanTermLimits.org.
AmericanTermLimits.org. AmericanTermLimits.org. Take care.
Tonight on the Worldview Report, a White House Religious Liberty Commission hearing on anti-Semitism gets hijacked when a commissioner attacks Jewish witnesses over Zionism and defends Candace Owens, prompting Chairman Dan Patrick to announce her immediate removal. Then our friend Robert Spencer testifies before Congress that Sharia or Islamic law is inherently political and violent, directly incompatible with the U.S. Constitution, and he cites authoritative Islamic texts on jihad, proving it, as well as blasphemy penalties and subjection of non-Muslims. And then in our next story, foreign-born Representative Sharif Anadar, he threatens Republicans with prison once Democrats regain power, warning CBP officials they'll face accountability for enforcing immigration laws under Trump. And then Democrats, they demand ICE be banned from or near polling places in their DHS funding conditions, raising the question, if non-citizens never vote, why the special protection for voting sites? And then finally, in my commentary tonight, European leaders are facing massive disapproval and are cracking down on dissent with censorship raids, fines, age bans, and threats to block X, turning so-called safety into a tool for silencing critics and building state-controlled echo chambers. The Worldview Report begins right now.
This is Worldview Report with host Brandon House. Whether it is news from the nation's capital or your state capital, from the classroom to the boardroom, from national security to national and local news that impacts you and your family, Worldview Report is your trusted source for vital and uncensored news. And now, here is Brandon House.
Good evening and welcome to the Worldview Report. I'm Brennan House. A White House Religious Liberty Commission hearing on anti-Semitism at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. on February 9th of this year, 2026. Well, it turned contentious when Commissioner Carrie Prejean Bowler, a former Miss California and so-called conservative activist, repeatedly challenged Jewish witnesses over their support for Israel, over their Zionism. She defended figures accused of anti-Semitism. The commission, it was established by President Trump via executive order back in May of 2025, and it is chaired by Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, along with Dr. Ben Carson as vice chair, and it aims to advise on religious liberty policies. Witnesses, they included Ari Berman, Shabbos Kastenbaum, Bruce Pearl, and Liat Cohen-Rees. They all, of course, are Jewish. And then, of course, Leo Terrell, DOJ task force head on anti-Semitism. Witnesses, they described the rising anti-Semitism that has occurred worldwide and in America since the Hamas attacks on Israel, October 7th, 2023. Moshe Glick, he linked America's success to Judeo-Christian values and warned that societies rise or fall on the treatment of Jews. Liat Cohen-Rees, he noted incidences that are all over the country, demonstrating anti-Semitism. Well, Prajine Bowler, she was wearing what appeared to be a U.S. and Palestinian flag pin. And she tallied the mentions of Israel. She said 17 times Israel has been mentioned, and she pressed witnesses. Quote, since we've mentioned Israel a total of 17 times, are you willing to condemn what Israel has done in Gaza? You won't condemn that? Just on the record? End quote. Then she asked, quote, I want to be clear on what the definition of anti-Zionism is. If I don't support the political state of Israel, am I an anti-Semite? Yes or no? End quote. Then she added, quote, Catholics do not embrace Zionism, just so you know. So are all Catholics anti-Semites? End quote. That, of course, drew boos from the audience. And then she defended Candace Owens, stating, quote, I listen to her daily. I haven't heard one thing out of her mouth that I would say is anti-Semitic. She just doesn't support Zionism, end quote. She urged witnesses to stop labeling Owens as an anti-Semite. One rabbi in attendance, he's the commission's sole Jewish member, he responded measurably, quote, this is an incredibly diverse country. And one thing we should be careful about is speaking on behalf of all members of a religious community, even if one is a member of that religious community, end quote. He quoted Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who is a Catholic, affirming the Jewish people's connection to the land of Israel. That, of course, is what makes someone a Zionist. A Zionist, by definition, is someone who believes in Israel's historical right to the land. Not to be confused with a Christian Zionist. Christian Zionist believes they have a historical right to the land, but also a biblical right to the land. Apparently, Prajine did not understand the differences between Zionism and Christian Zionism. Well, in a subsequent development, Commission Chairman Dan Patrick, he announced Bowler's removal. This happened in a tweet. Quote, Carrie Prajine Bowler has been removed from President Trump's Religious Liberty Commission. No member of the commission has the right to hijack a hearing for their own personal and political agenda on any issue. This is clearly, without question, what happened Monday in our hearing on anti-Semitism in America. This was my decision. The commission has done outstanding work through 5 hearings. 2 more are scheduled. The testimony has been both illuminating and heartbreaking. Under the Biden administration, Americans of all faiths had their religious liberty not only stolen from them, but were often punished for standing up for their faith in education, the military, the private sector, and even the ministry. This spring, the commission will deliver one of the most important reports in American history directly to the president. The president respects all faiths. He believes that all Americans have a right to receive the great inheritance given to them by our founding fathers in the First Amendment. I am grateful to President Trump for having the vision and boldness to create this commission. Fighting for the word of God and religious freedom is what this nation was founded upon. Leading this fight will be one of his greatest legacies, end quote. Prajine went on to declare, as you heard, that Catholics don't believe in Zionism. And yet, of course, many Catholics online are now responding, saying they're Catholic and they believe in Israel's historical right to the land. Of course, there have been many members, both in the House and the Senate, that are Catholic, who have indeed also stood with the Zionist idea of Israel having a historical right to the land. Prajine, she tried to tie Zionism to trying to fulfill some kind of biblical prophecy or line up with biblical prophecy. Again, she seems to confuse Zionist with Christian Zionist. Many Zionists, well, they can be Catholic, they can be Christian, but some of the Zionists have no religious backdrop at all, no background at all. They can even be atheist. It is the Christian Zionists, such as myself, that do believe that Israel has a historical right to the land, but also a biblical right to the land per Genesis chapter 15. And as we see in the Old and New Testament, particularly Romans chapter 11, God is not done with the Jewish people, and that his promises to them are irrevocable. So indeed, I am looking for Bible prophecy to be fulfilled through Gentiles. The church age is setting the stage for this, but it will be Gentiles during the tribulation period and, remarkably, the many Jews that fulfill Bible prophecy. including crying out, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord," and thus the second coming. So, congratulations, Dan Patrick, for the firing or removal of Miss Carrie Prejean. Robert Spencer is a regular guest on my broadcast, Brandon House Live, and he's also a fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center. He testified before the House Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution and Limited Government. This was in a hearing that was entitled Sharia-Free America: Why Political Islam and Sharia Are Incompatible with the U.S. Constitution. In his prepared statement, Spencer declared, quote, "The U.S. Constitution and Sharia, that's Islamic law, are incompatible, and the conflict between the two legal systems will grow as Sharia adherents increase in number in the West," end quote. He described Sharia as, quote, "inherently political, supremacist, expansionist, and violent," end quote. He contrasted it with the claims from groups like CARE that portray it as merely personal religious practices, such as prayer, fasting, and charity. Spencer, he cited the authoritative Sharia manual known as Reliance of the Traveler, which is endorsed by some of the leading scholars of Islam on the international stage. One such scholar described it as a, quote, textbook for teaching Islamic jurisprudence, end quote. Spencer quoted, quote, "Jihad means to war against non-Muslims," end quote. And stated it is a, quote, communal obligation upon the Muslim community, end quote, to establish Sharia's hegemony. In his testimony, Robert Spencer noted, quote, "Non-Muslims under Sharia must pay the jizya poll tax, which Islamic scholar Ibn Kathir explained indicates payers are, quote, disgraced, humiliated, and belittled," end quote. Then there's the death penalty for blasphemy, mentioning, quote, something impermissible about Allah, the Prophet, or Islam, end quote. And Robert pointed out that directly contradicts the First Amendment and free speech protections. The imperative to establish Sharia as the law of the land, well, it conflicts with the First Amendment's prohibition on the establishment of religion. And then there's the issue of domestic violence. The Quran permits a man to beat a woman from whom, quote, he fears disobedience, end quote, while it is a crime under U.S. law. Robert Spencer warned that as the Islamic populations in America grow, conflicts will intensify due to these incompatibilities.
The U.S. Constitution and Sharia are incompatible, and the conflict between the two legal systems will grow as Sharia adherents increase in number in the West. This fact has been obscured by misinformation about what Sharia actually is. When the city of Keller, Texas, scrapped an anti-Sharia resolution in January 2026, the Hamas-linked Council on American Islamic Relations, CARE, stated that like canon law for Catholics and halakha for Orthodox Jews, Sharia refers to the rules that Muslims follow, including praying 5 times a day, fasting in Ramadan, giving in charity, and following the laws of the land in which they live. If that were really all that Sharia were about, no reasonable person would have any problem with it. CARE doesn't mention, however, that Sharia is inherently political, supremacist, expansionist, and violent. Far from being the Islamophobic conspiracy theories of CARE's imagining, these are facts that Muslim authorities on Sharia openly attest. Reliance of the Traveler, Umdat as-Salik, is a classic manual of Islamic sacred law, that is Sharia. In 1990, Dr. Taha Jabir Alawani, president of the International Institute of Islamic Thought, as well as president of the Fiqh Council of North America, stated that this Sharia manual was useful as a textbook for teaching Islamic jurisprudence. The most prestigious institution of Islamic learning in the world, Al-Azhar in Cairo, stated in 1991 that the same manual of Sharia conforms to the practice and faith of the Orthodox Sunni community. We read in this same guide to Sharia that jihad means war against non-Muslims and that it is a communal obligation upon the Muslim community. The object of this war is to establish the hegemony of Sharia over the conquered land. For non-Muslims, this means an institutionalized, highly codified second-class status that denies them basic rights. Non-Muslims living under Sharia must pay the non-Muslim poll tax, jizya, that is specified in the Quran, verse 929. This religion-based tax is designed to indicate, as the renowned Islamic scholar Ibn Kathir explained, that the non-Muslims who are paying it are disgraced, humiliated, and belittled. The non-Muslims in this state of disgrace and humiliation are not allowed to build new houses of worship or repair old ones, so their communities are in a perpetual state of decline. They are forbidden to make any public display of their religion. They're relegated to the most menial jobs in society, for they are forbidden to hold authority over Muslims. If they say anything critical about Islam, Muhammad, or the Quran, they're liable to be put to death.
The hearing went on to examine efforts to establish Sharia-based institutions, their contradiction to U.S. founding principles, potential federal law violations, and proposed reforms to protect Americans from such alternatives. I'll have some video clips tonight on Brandon House Live of this excellent testimony by our friend Robert Spencer. Thank you, Robert. The Federalist, they published an article by Brianna Lyman entitled "Foreign-Born Member of Congress Threatens Republicans with Prison When Democrats Regain Power." It reports that Representative Sharif Thandar, he's a Democrat from Michigan and is a foreign-born congressman, he reportedly openly threatened to prosecute political opponents if Democrats regain power. During a committee hearing on Tuesday, Thandar, he addressed Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Rodney Scott, stating, quote, "You better hope you get pardoned, because you will be held accountable for the absolute disregard of the law your agencies have shown over the past year," end quote. He accused Scott's agencies of losing public trust, claiming, quote, "Your agencies have lost the trust of the American people, with millions taking to the streets to protect the illegal actions of your agencies. And that's why I introduced a bill in the United States, Congress, to abolish ICE. ICE must be abolished," end quote. The piece at the Federalist frames his remarks as part of a broader pattern of Democratic threats to use lawfare against Republicans, against the Trump administration officials and supporters once they are out of power. The article, it cites several examples. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, he said, quote, "One thing to understand is people who are flirting with the Trump administration are doing the bidding of the Trump administration or engaging in the pay-to-play schemes of the Trump administration. The statute of limitations is 5 years. Donald Trump and this toxic administration will be long gone, but there will still be accountability to be had," end quote. During a House Judiciary Committee hearing, Representative Hank Johnson, Democrat from Georgia, he asked the special counsel, Jack Smith, quote, "So they can be refiled and President Trump can be prosecuted after he leaves office. Is that correct?" End quote. Smith confirmed the indictments were, quote, "dismissed without prejudice," end quote, allowing potential refiling. Representative Jasmine Crockett, Democrat from Texas, said that Democrats intend to target Trump's family if they regain a House majority. Left-wing commentator Scott Galloway, he said, quote, "There should be something equivalent to the Nuremberg trials once this is all over," end quote, adding, quote, "Once we're back in power, which we will be, this is going to happen. And the statute of limitations on murder is never," end quote. The article, it describes Thandar as struggling to speak English during the hearing and portrays his threat as a, quote, "indictment of our legal immigration system," end quote. The article argues that this revives the Democrats' 2024 playbook of targeting opponents through legal means with explicit vows of post-presidency accountability for enforcing immigration laws and other policies under President Trump. We'll be right back after this short break. What if millions around the world could access Bible teaching and worldview training for free right now without hitting a paywall? That's exactly what happens every day at worldviewtube.com because of the Worldview Weekend Foundation. We don't lock our live stream behind PayPal. We don't restrict our content to members only. Instead, the Worldview Weekend Foundation helps cover the cost of delivering free educational and ministry programming to people across the nation and around the world. And it's not just programming. My Sunday night church service, where I taught verse by verse through Revelation for 18 months, and now I am teaching through the book of Daniel, is made possible through the support of our church, Worldview Weekend Foundation. If you believe this kind of truth-centered biblical teaching must continue, donate today. Go now to worldviewfoundation.com. You'll also find our mailing address and phone number there if you'd rather give by phone or mail. That's worldviewfoundation.com. Thank you. Welcome back from the break. Thanks again for being with us tonight and every night, and for remembering we are brought to you by you. We are a listener-supported network. This broadcast is put out each and every night free of charge as a public education and ministry service of our foundation in part. Worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. I know you hear me say this each and every night. I hope you haven't gone deaf to this little promotion I do each night for our foundation, because it's so vital that we have your support. Thank you to all of you that are supporting us, but we need more. We need more supporters. And again, a $10, $20 a month contribution, it is not to be dismissed as, well, not significant enough, because most of our donors are small dollar donors, and it all adds up to give us the resources we need to push out free programming like this. Otherwise, we could put it all behind a paywall, and we would then not be reaching as many people as we are. We're reaching so many people. Some people, they can't afford to give to us. So we want to make sure we're pushing this out as ministry as well as education. Some folks, they don't know about us until they watch a show or two, and they're not prone to finding us if we're behind a paywall. And we want to educate as many people as we can. We have so many people that will write us and say, I just stumbled on your program. I found you on YouTube or on X, or someone mentioned your show and I looked you up and now I don't miss a broadcast. Well, if we were behind a paywall, they would have never found us, right? So it's important that we're out here where the public can find us literally all over the world. But again, putting out free programming is very expensive. Our bandwidth bill, I just paid a bill for that, was like $8,000 for the month. So again, pushing out free programming is very expensive. The bandwidth alone is very, very high. And that's just what we're charged when so many people are watching. So if you appreciate what we're doing, we need your support. Worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. As I always say, you will find our mailing address there if you prefer to support us through the mail. So thank you for that. In our next story, there is a major settlement in the ongoing immigration and housing enforcement battle in Texas. That was announced on February 11th, 2026. Do you remember Colony Ridge? It's a large development in Liberty County, north of Houston. We covered Colony Ridge many times. We began talking about Colony Ridge several years ago when it was brought to our attention by broadcast partner Todd Bensman. Remember Todd flying over Colony Ridge with a helicopter? That's how big it is. And he was telling us there were a lot of illegals that were being housed there. They were even given loans to build and develop. And then I guess when they would default, the owner of the property would turn around and resell it again. And the claim by Todd was that some of these properties had changed hands many times, but it was largely a development of illegal aliens. And it, again, was so big, Todd would fly over it. We showed the video footage on TV at least 2 or 3 years ago. He would fly over it with a helicopter. Well, apparently, according to the news report, that group, Colony Ridge, the developers, has agreed to pay $68 million to resolve a federal lawsuit that was originally filed under the Biden administration. The development, it had indeed drawn scrutiny for allegedly creating a safe harbor, as I said, for illegal immigrants. And then, of course, there was the reported endangering of citizens and operating in ways that, well, bypass standard immigration and housing regulations. The case, it has been transformed under the Trump administration, and the Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, he has sought to incorporate significant immigration-related reforms into all of this. The settlement, here are some of the terms. They include $48 million allocated for infrastructure improvements, such as drainage and sewage upgrades. $20 million to fund construction of a new law enforcement center inside the development. And then enhance compliance measures, requiring purchasers to present a valid Texas-issued driver's license or identification card or a valid visa issued after January 1st, 2025. Placement of a law enforcement presence within the community and linkage to federal immigration cooperation. That's being done under Section 287G, which enables local authorities to perform certain immigration enforcement functions, all in partnership with ICE. The Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, he stated, quote, Colony Ridge endangered American citizens by allowing illegal aliens to run rampant on its streets, in its schools, and in its community. Now it's time for those responsible to pay a steep cost for their unlawful actions. My office will continue to bring the full force of the law against anyone who threatens the safety of our state or creates a safe harbor for illegals, end quote. His office added that the agreement, quote, halts the development of a de facto illegal immigrant community and ensures that Colony Ridge complies with Texas and federal law going forward, end quote. Hamid Dillon, head of the DOJ's Civil Rights Division, she commented, quote, the changes required by this settlement will promote public safety and affordable and sustainable home ownership in America. This Department of Justice will continue to go after lenders, financiers, and land developers who participate in schemes that undermine communities and violate federal law, end quote. The settlement does not involve mass deportations or closure of the community to immigrants, but it does impose guardrails on future sales and operations, of course, marking a shift from a pure consumer protection case to one embedding immigration enforcement mechanisms. In a February 2026 article from the Gatestone Institute entitled, Welcome to the EU SSR, Unpopular European Regimes Grasping for Power Crackdown on Dissent. That's the name of the article. And the piece, well, it details how several European governments facing deep and very unpopular, ideas, they are accelerating on the crackdowns when it comes to free speech through things like censorship, fines, raids, and threats to ban or restrict platforms like X. The examples include Spain's Prime Minister Sanchez. He announced regulations making algorithmic amplification of, quote, illegal, hateful, or harmful, end quote, content, a criminal offense, folks, with social media executives, facing imprisonment for non-removal. The, quote, hate and polarization footprint system, end quote, will also track how platforms fuel division. The Minister of Youth and Children stated that the next battle is to limit or ban X altogether, saying, quote, the next battle should be aimed at limiting and likely banning Twitter, end quote. France, they plan to ban minors from Instagram and TikTok. French authorities and Europol, they raided X's Paris office over suspected algorithm abuse and so-called deep fakes and AI chatbot concerns. It was prompted by complaints from a Macron party MP about, quote, nauseating political content, end quote, and reduced so-called voice diversity. Over in Britain, the Information Commissioner's Office and Ofcom, they're investigating X over deep fakes. Technology Secretary Liz Kendall supports potential blocking. Over in Denmark and Greece, they're in stages considering X bans or age restrictions. At the EU level, the European Commission fined X 120 million euros under the Digital Services Act that some describe as the delete, silence, abolish tool, enabling over-censorship via vague hate definitions, so-called hate. Telegram founder Pavel Durov, he warned, quote, danger. Governments will dictate what you see, bearing opposing views and creating echo chambers controlled by the state. These aren't safeguards. They're steps toward total control, end quote. Elon Musk, He called Sanchez a, quote, true fascist totalitarian, end quote. The article, it warns that governments are weaponizing so-called safety. That's what they call it. It's all for safety purposes, but it's really about censoring critics, creating state-curated echo chambers and propaganda while ignoring the real threats, which, of course, all of this, well, it poses the risk of sliding into a surveillance state and authoritarianism, akin to historical Soviet tactics. What's really happening is so-called hate speech is becoming the catch-all phrase for anything that challenges the regime's narrative, whether criticisms of open borders, Islamization, or globalist policies. It's not about safety at all. It's about control. It's about a political weapon to silence your critics. In the Bible, we're warned that evil will be called good, good will be called evil, and that many people will reject truth. Those who speak truth will come under great persecution. So we need to be vigilant because what is happening over there in Europe, well, it's taking root here big time. And if this fully grows in America, well, it won't be long before so-called hate crime laws take this program right off the air, that yours truly could find himself being indicted for speaking truth. Of course, it'll be called Islamophobia, hate speech, whatever they label it. They'll be attacking and going after those that speak truth. This is not a joke. This is not doom and gloom. It's a warning. It's a reality. The Bible says that a wise man, a prudent man, acknowledges danger, seeks to avoid it, or to warn about it. That's what we're doing. Because it won't be long before many people will be asking, how did this happen? How did this happen? And we might explain it to them. And their response is going to be, but if we'd only known, if we'd only known. That is so historically accurate. So many say that after